I'm Rufus Griscom.
And I'm Caleb Bissinger.
And this is The Next Big Idea. Today, Steven Pinker on the surprising ways that common knowledge,
what I know that you know that I know,
that we know, shapes our world. Good morning, Caleb.
Morning, Rufus. How are you?
Pretty good, man. I thought it'd be fun to introduce this episode together because, full disclosure, no surprise to you, Steven Pinker has been a bit of an intellectual hero for me for some time. His book, The Blank Slate, which came out in 2002, was one of a small number of books that profoundly impacted my view of the world.
All right, so I'm here to just keep your fanboy instincts in check.
Among other reasons, you make other contributions. I mean, something we aspire to do on this show is share all sides of the arguments of our day, and it helps that you and I don't agree on everything.
That's true, like the nutritional benefit of a warm bowl of pasta.
What nutritional benefit? There is none. But also, there are questions like how quickly will AI accelerate?
Not as fast as you think.
Has woke culture done more harm than good? And how often am I allowed to have a glass of red wine?
Well, I don't know that we disagree about that. I think you always have my permission to enjoy a glass of red wine. But yeah, I think part of my job is to push back when you're suffering from generational myopia.
I appreciate that. And this is a nice segue to Steven Pinker because he's ruffled some feathers on the left over the years. Mm-hmm. And I think we can trace that all the way back to The Blank Slate, which I read more than 20 years ago now. His core argument was that the then common belief, a belief I had at the time, that humans are tabula rasas, blank slates, and that most all human behavior is just a result of our environment, is not consistent with the science. Steven argued that our human nature does include capacities for empathy, cooperation, and reason, and better understanding the complexity of our nature can help us build more enlightened societies.
And I think the concern from the left is that if you overemphasize nature, if you say nurture doesn't really matter that much, you're on a slippery slope to then making arguments like, well, yeah, there's nothing we can do about inequality because, success in life comes down to genes. That's just it. That's the ball game.
Yes. I think his counter would be that he was saying it was a balance of nature and nurture, not just all nurture, but it was provocative. Fast forward to Steven's more recent books, The Better Angels of Our Nature and Enlightenment Now, which managed to further inflame folks on the left. His claim that over the great sweep of human history, violence has been in decline and science and reason have improved the human condition was read by many liberals as a failure to see and properly address systemic injustice.
Yeah, I think, again, a little more nuance on that. I think also a concern that there's just a dangerous complacency in celebrating the status quo, which I think you could argue Steven does in that book, right? That if you just say things are pretty good, they're getting better, the logical takeaway is just, well, we should just keep doing what we're doing. We shouldn't rock the boat. And for some, myself included, that can feel tone deaf when you look out the window and you see soaring inequality, or you see an accelerating climate disaster, or you see hundreds of millions of people living in extreme poverty. You see all these things happening in the world that make it hard to accept that, well, incrementally things are getting better and we should just keep doing what we're doing.
To me, there are two questions here. What's true about the world and what motivates people to fix things? Is it better to tell people the sky's falling, everything's a catastrophe, or better to say, look at the progress we've made, now let's make a lot more progress?
Yeah, no, a fair point. Well, look, we didn't come here to debate Steven Pinker's old books. We came to talk about his new book. Why don't you tell us about that one?
I was actually here to debate his old book. But yes, let's get into his new book. So Steven's new book is called When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows. It makes the case that a wide range of social phenomena, from financial bubbles to cancel culture to Super Bowl ads, can be best explained by the concept of common knowledge, when people not only know something, but know that everyone knows it, and so on. This is really a fun book. I would argue the most fun of Steven Pinker's books. You're going to hear a lot of that in the conversation that follows, but it also lands on what I consider to be a really important point. We are a highly collaborative species, and the observance of norms is critical to our ability to collaborate at scale. All these layers of common knowledge are really about the dance we do to protect a set of norms despite all of our divergent motivations and the complex reality that we live in. These norms, which include everything from how we flirt with one another to our respect for the borders of other nations, are not just about politeness or propriety. They're the rails that all of human collaboration runs on.
So you're saying that when we take a sledgehammer to our norms, like, threaten to invade Greenland, we should tread carefully.
Yeah, maybe pick a smaller island. There we go. Sure. All right, Caleb. So let's bring in Steven Pinker. I'm going to try to channel your point of view in a few places in this conversation.
I appreciate that. We'll see how you do.
All right, let's get into it.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to tell you that Michelob Ultra, the official beer partner of the NBA, is bringing NBA fans closer than ever this season with chances to win great prizes, including courtside tickets. Enter now at michelobultra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Courtside 25 to 26. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 plus. Begins on October 1st, 2025 and ends on June 30th, 2026. Multiple entry periods. See official rules at michelobultra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
Steven Pinker, welcome back to The Next Big Idea.
Thank you.
Steve, you and I spoke about your last book, Rationality, 4 years ago. I can't believe it's been 4 years. In that book, you wrote, "The arc of knowledge is a long one, and it bends towards rationality." The last 4 years, it seems to me, have tested this. Do you continue to think we're becoming more rational?
Well, it depends how long is. I do think that the truth has a built-in advantage, namely it doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. And so there are fads and phrases that are popular in the short term, like witch hunts, like human sacrifice, tend to disintegrate simply because reality doesn't conform to them. The way I think of it is there's maybe greater inequality in rationality. That is, there's an awful lot of nonsense circulating, and social media make it easier. At the other end, we have the development of artificial intelligence, which is a spectacular growth in artificial rationality. And many professions are becoming increasingly data-driven, analytics-driven, sometimes toward goals that we may not want to optimize, but certainly the means available are becoming more prevalent at the high end.
Well, you are continuing to help us become more rational and to help us illuminate the complexity of this complex species we're all a part of. Your latest book is When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, ... You fought for that ellipsis at the end of the title. Why does that matter so much?
So the book is about common knowledge in a technical sense. Our ordinary idiom common knowledge refers to something that is widely known or widely believed, conventional wisdom. But there is a technical sense in which common knowledge consists of the state in which I know something, you know it, I know that you know it, you know that I know it, and so on, ad infinitum. So it's when everyone knows that everyone knows, and everyone knows that, and everyone knows that. That's why I had to fight for the 3 dots. I go through the somewhat exotic proof that must be true. But it can also be appreciated in everyday life, where each one knowing that the other knows may not be the same as knowing that the other one knows that they know that the other one knows, and so on. So, for example, in an awkward moment, say at the end of a date in which, say, a man invites a woman up to his apartment for coffee, and she says no, He kind of knows that she's turned down a sexual overture, and she knows that she's turned down a sexual overture. But she may not know that he knows that she knows. She might be thinking, well, maybe he thinks I'm naive. And he might think, well, maybe she doesn't know that I know that she knows. Maybe she thinks I'm dense and that she just turned down coffee. So that's the case where you have reciprocal knowledge. I mean, they're both grown-ups. They both know how human interactions work. And so they both know what just happened. There's still some doubt as to the other one knows that they know. They're just to address an obvious objection, namely, how could anyone wrap their mind around, I know that she knows that I know that she knows? I mean, your head starts to spin. Common knowledge can be generated in a stroke by the intuition that something is out there, public, latent in your face, unignorable, self-evident. And that gives rise to a kind of instantaneous perception that something is common knowledge, which we experience just in the sense that something is out there. You can't take it back. It's the elephant in the room. Even though we don't have to reel out all of the I know that she knows that I know that she knows thoughts, they're implicit. They're packed into that awareness that something is out there. That's the thesis of the book anyway.
Well, serious students of human behavior have known about these dynamics since at least 1999, when this episode of the TV show Friends aired. The setup is that Monica and Chandler are having a secret romance. There's a battle of wits over who knows what, leading to this memorable line.
They don't know that we know they know we know. And Joe, you can't say anything.
Couldn't if I wanted to.
So we're naturally drawn to these layers of information, but we have a hard time keeping it straight in our head. Joey is not the only one who has trouble keeping that straight.
We all have trouble. And I have a chapter in the book called Reading the Mind of a Mind Reader. The fancy technical term is recursive mentalizing. Mentalizing is the term in cognitive psychology for trying to get into someone's head. Mind reading, not in the sense of ESP or telepathy, but mind reading in the sense of paying attention to their social cues, what they say. Recursive mentalizing is trying to get into the head of someone who's trying to get into the head of someone who's trying to get into the head of someone. That episode, which I quote, and there are others like it in popular culture, like the Battle of Wits scene in The Princess Bride, which I wish I had included in that.
Yes, I love that scene.
Now, a clever man would put the poison into his own goblet because he would know that only a great fool would reach for what he was given. I'm not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you.
And I think we do engage in that kind of getting inside someone's head when they're trying to get inside someone else's head. But the point of self-evidence or conspicuity or something just being out there is we don't need to do that. We can get that sense instantly when we have an intuition that something is public, self-evident, mutually conspicuous. That is, I'm seeing something at the same time that you're seeing it, and we see each other seeing it. And that's a situation in which common knowledge appears in one fell swoop. And there are others, like and I discuss a number of the social signals that we have that generate common knowledge.
I am fascinated, as I know you are, by the evolutionary history of why we have developed this set of instincts to have all these forms of kind of collective self-deception effectively, right? You say at one point, human curiosity about what other people think about them is inexhaustible.
Yes.
You know, what do other people think of me? How many people know? Do they know that I know they know? For a social species like ours, this is really salient information that we sometimes disparagingly call gossip.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, like the evolutionary niche of Homo sapiens is one of massive interdependence. We evolved to be passionately interested in the intricacies of our knowledge of other people and their knowledge of us, right? Do you think this goes all the way back?
Yeah, I think it is one of the things that makes Homo sapiens such an unusual species. We cooperate on scales from couples to nation states and corporations and universities. And when we do, there is some trading of favors, reciprocal altruism, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. There's an awful lot of coordinated behavior where things work in everyone's interests, as long as they're on the same page. So an example from our evolutionary history, say driving games. A human cannot outrun an antelope, but a group of people acting together can kind of fan out, make a lot of noise, scare the animals, to a patch of land where it's trapped and they can then dispatch him or even force it over the edge of a cliff. But only if they all work together. One person banging a drum, the animal will just zip away. But a group of people cornering the animal can accomplish what a single one doesn't. But only if they all get together at the same time, coordinate their plans. Language, of course, is the best way of doing that because the content is unlimited, as I've written about in previous books. And I think the main reason we have evolved language is it's a cheap and easy common knowledge generator, allowing coordination. And in a modern society, our lives are governed by corporations, by governments, by universities, by nonprofits, by things like money, all of which have a powerful existence, even though they're not made out of stuff. They're made out of common knowledge. That is, they exist because everyone knows they exist and everyone else knows that.
If we're looking for evidence of the deep evolutionary history of these instincts, I think these examples of when we involuntarily communicate with one another are particularly resonant. You have a wonderful chapter where you talk about laughing and blushing and crying. Let's start with blushing, which Darwin referred to as the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. What's happening when we blush?
And Mark Twain echoed that by saying, man is the only animal that blushes or needs to.
Right.
Yeah, so the thing that I suggest about blushing is that it's a number of nonverbal displays that generate common knowledge because they're unignorable both from the inside and from the outside. So when you're blushing, you feel the heat in your cheeks while knowing that other people can see the reddening in your cheeks from the outside. And moreover, when you know that they are seeing the reddening, you know that they know that you know that you're blushing, as when they say, "You're blushing," which of course makes someone blush even more.
Right.
It's almost designed as a common knowledge generator because it's perceivable both from the inside and the outside. And what it does is it generates common knowledge that you know that other people think you have screwed up. You've committed a faux pas. You've claimed more than your fair share of attention.
And you care, and you're sensitive to this fact.
That's exactly right. And as Darwin noted, he was, as with so many things, he was so insightful, so prescient. Blushing is not a confession of guilt. It's not a telltale heart. It's not a lie detector. People blush even when they're completely innocent. But as Darwin said, we blush in the presence of our accusers. Knowing that other people think we've committed a faux pas makes us blush even if we know that we haven't. And people will blush when everyone turns around and sings happy birthday to them. I haven't done anything wrong. It's really to acknowledge I haven't tried to become the center of attention. I'm no better than you. And crucially, in all of the cases in which we blush, as you noted, it's an acknowledgement that I play by the same rules that you're playing by. I may have screwed up, but I know that you think I've screwed up. Therefore, I'm not a weirdo. I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a loose cannon. Where the social rules in place, I know what they are.
I think the last time that I blushed was when I was a birthday, people singing to me in a restaurant or something. Right? I very reliably blushed. And I think you say in the book, this is one of the most common occasions in which people blush. And you think the crime is aging.
No, I think the crime is appearing to claim the spotlight of attention.
Grandstanding or
yes.
Yeah, claiming attention. And this is fundamentally about the incredible importance of dominance, of our desire collectively to be egalitarian and to at least appear to have a egalitarian approach, even when we know the reality of our interactions with our fellow colleagues and Homo sapiens is more complex than that there are hierarchies and there are different status levels and dominance, but we put great effort into maintaining a kind of egalitarian stance. And that's part of why we have, there's some levels of deceit effectively in our collective common knowledge.
Well, crucially, we have different kinds of relationships and we switch among them depending on the people involved and the context and the resource in question. Sometimes we want to be in hierarchical relations. An employee defers to a boss, a sergeant defers to the colonel, etc. And more informally, we often have informal dominance hierarchies. And they're great when you're on top. But we also have egalitarian relationships among friends and a family setting, among colleagues, where you actually want to actively signal, I'm not trying to be the alpha, and I won't let you become the alpha. So I think that's why people blush in communal, egalitarian social circles where you really don't want to be lording anything over anyone else. You don't want to be making a claim to being special. And I think it's also the basis of self-deprecating humor. Laughing also is a common knowledge generator. When you laugh, you know it because it interrupts your breathing, it interrupts your speech. And of course, other people know because they can hear it. They hear the ha ha ha. The common denominator in laughter, I suggest, is that it's a human's counter-dominance mechanism.
Yes.
Many species that have dominance hierarchies also have counter-dominance signals. When you try to take down the alpha or climb up the rank, in humans, what humor consists of is noting some infirmity, some weakness, some embarrassment, some humiliation, some shortcoming, some pratfall, sometimes aggressively, when you poke fun of a superior, or for that matter, a subordinate, to reinforce the hierarchy or level it. But humor can also be used convivially. I mean, one of the greatest pleasures in life is you sit around laughing with friends. And what you're often doing is you're making jokes at your own expense. You're gently teasing your buddies. And what I think that's doing is, as a counter-dominant signal, it's saying, in this group of people, there is no dominance. We're all equals. We're part of a circle of sharing and mutual care. And in real life, very few instances of laughter come in response to an actual joke,
right,
or even anything that would be funny out of context. And this is studies done by Robert Provine, a human ethologist. And you can try it for yourself. Next time you're in a social circle or setting, even with a friend or a group of friends, pay attention to what makes people laugh. It's almost never a joke, and it's almost never even funny. It's something like, "You can't be serious," or "I can't believe it," or "You'll never guess what happened next." Utterly banal lines that just signal some kind of minor breach of order, of decorum, of dignity. We constantly do that to reinforce the idea that we're all equals.
Right.
And each of us knows that the other knows, because the converse, a relationship of dominance, is also a matter of common knowledge, unless you're actually fighting, which people and other animals sometimes do. But actual fights are rare. More often, a subordinate defers to a superior because they know the superior will stand his ground, and the superior can get away with standing his ground because he knows the subordinate will give way, and the subordinate gives way because he knows the superior will stand his ground. So it is another case of common knowledge of where you stand in the hierarchy. And the reason that animals, including humans, do that is sometimes a resource isn't worth fighting over. So it's worth deferring to avoid at the cost of a fight that will injure you both. Of course, the time may come when you really do want to challenge it. If you're always getting the short end of the stick, then you might bring something into common knowledge. Well, you might physically fight, or you might just bring up something, stop deferring, say, "Hey, like in a marriage, you're always getting your way. I've let you because I don't want to fight all the time, but you're starting to exploit me, and we now have to renegotiate our relationship."
As you say, when you pay attention to it, so much of laughter is not actually provoked by something funny, and so much of it is sort of performative, right? We utter these little laughs, throughout our conversations in ways that are often, self-deprecatory or acknowledging or deferring to someone else. Of course, we also have these involuntary belly laughs, right? And there's a wonderful description in your book, I can't resist reading it, of laughter written in 1579 by a French physician named Laurent Joubert. Here's what he says. He says, "In laughter, the face is moving, the mouth widens, the eyes sparkle and tear, the cheeks redden, the breast heaves. The veins in the throat become enlarged, the arms shake, and the legs dance about. We cough, perspire, piss, and besmirch ourselves by dint of laughing, and sometimes we even faint away because of it. This need not be proven." So when you think about it, it's incredibly bizarre, this thing that we do. But when we collectively, involuntarily release a belly laugh like that, it's often in these kind of counter-dominance situations where someone in a position of power has been made fun of. Would that be a common occasion for such laughter?
Most laughter takes someone down a couple of pegs, including ourselves when we want to avoid dominance. And a lot of humor can be outright aggressive, slapstick. It often involves humiliations like excretion, shitting and pissing and farting, pies in the face. Cuckoldry has always been a rich source of humor. Various kinds of indignity and taking down. And as that passage from Joubert reinforces, the reason that people have puzzled over humor for so long is that the trigger is cognitive. It's cerebral. It's some sort of information, but the response is physical.
Yes.
Our muscles, our diaphragm, our larynx, all of those are involved in a real physical response to something that might just be a sheer witticism. The reason that it's so physical is to generate common knowledge, and also the reason that it's voluntary and the reason that it's contagious. Namely, it makes something that was private knowledge common knowledge. That is, each one of us knew that there was some embarrassment or indignity. By laughing, I now am aware of it, and I'm aware that you're aware of it. That can generate solidarity, strength in numbers, and it could make it undeniable to both parties, therefore reinforcing the decline in dignity.
Yeah, it just, as you were talking, I just thought of a scene, and I think it was in the movie This Is 40, where the husband and wife are talking about ways they've imagined murdering each other.
I feel like you want to kill me.
I do want to kill you.
How would you do it?
Oh, no. I'd poison you. Have you ever thought about killing me?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Sure.
How would you do it?
Wood chipper.
A wood chipper?
Yeah.
That was played out for laughs in that fictitious scene. It's probably something, don't try this at home. And in the final chapter called Rational Hypocrisy, Radical Honesty, I note that it's almost a cliche to say that there are a lot of social rituals, there are white lies, there's politeness, there's kind of genteel, benign hypocrisy in human affairs. And I try to explain why that is the case. And the thought experiment of externalizing your private thoughts, making them common knowledge. In these fictitious circumstances, it works, but in real life, it may not. I mean, depending on the nature of the relationship. But people's imaginations seethe with wicked thoughts, with wicked fantasies. People have, and we know this from confidential surveys of private thoughts, people fantasize about having sex with all kinds of inappropriate partners, committing acts of aggression that would put them in jail, if not have them executed. If we are mature, aware adults, each of us knows that the other one has such fantasies. So we have the private knowledge, the reciprocal knowledge, but actually confessing to them can poison the nature of the relationship, because human relationships depend on certain commonly held assumptions that are fictions, but keep us together for all that. So among friends, it's that your devotion to your friend is limitless. You value their interests as much as your own. For couples, romantic couples, it's that you're completely faithful in heart as well as in deed. Again, none of these are literally true, but and sophisticated adults know they're not literally true. But making a common knowledge is nullifying the compact that allows that relationship to be sustained.
I love your example of a close friend saying to another close friend, I love you, but your story's getting kind of boring, and I've reached an inflection point where I'd rather watch a TV show.
Yes.
Right. Even with our very closest friends in the world who know us better than anyone, we wouldn't say that, but we would think it. We all have these thoughts. And so...
And when the friend says, make some lame excuse like, oh, I've got to go. If you're a sophisticated adult, you might even know that they're thinking, oh, he's had enough of me for now. And you accept that.
Right.
This goes back to the top of our conversation. What's the difference between two people knowing something, maybe even knowing that the other person knows it, versus knowing that they know that they know that they know it. And, in the case of that ending a conversation, both might know that one party is getting bored. He probably knows that the other one knows it, but still saying it, which generates the unlimited number of levels, can really change the relationship. It can lead to the emotion that we call awkwardness, or even if it's deliberate and sustained to outrage. And awkwardness is the emotion that kind of regulates our social relationships.
Thinking back on the example you gave earlier of Netflix and chill,
Yeah.
would you like to come up to my apartment, for a little Netflix and chill? It used to be, as you point out, etchings. Would you like to come see my etchings? Right, which was commonly known that that's a signal. Or would you like a cup of coffee at 12 midnight, which ended up being a bit in the Seinfeld episode, right?
Coffee's not coffee. Coffee is sex.
Maybe coffee was coffee.
Coffee's coffee in the morning. It's not coffee at 12 o'clock at night.
Well, some people drink coffee that late.
Yeah, people who work at NORAD or on 24-hour missile watch.
It is funny that when both parties are very clear on what this means, I'm inviting you to come upstairs and engage in sexual relations with me, that somehow this canard, this collective attempt to sort of pretend it's something else, actually accomplishes something. It's peculiar, isn't it? But I guess we want to potentially protect the friendship that might be damaged by a refusal of an invitation. It's funny to me that we're incapable of that we have to go to such lengths to protect these dynamics.
So it can protect a friendship if they're platonic friends, or even more fraught if one of them is a supervisor and a supervisee, or a professor and a student, a boss and an employee. Then, of course, we get into the grounds of sexual harassment. But to preserve the relationship that was in force, whether it be colleagues, friends, supervisor, not making it common knowledge allows the couple to go back to, or to reinforce, or at least not to dynamite the relationship that's currently in force.
Another really interesting example of common knowledge that you describe in the book is Super Bowl advertising, which turns out to be particularly valuable to certain types of companies. What are the kinds of companies that benefit from advertising specifically on the Super Bowl, and why?
Yeah, this is an insight that I got from the political scientist Michael Chue. The thing about the Super Bowl is that it is a nationwide common knowledge generator. That is, when you're watching the Super Bowl, you know that millions of Americans are watching the Super Bowl, and everyone knows it. The Super Bowl is a really big deal. And that makes it ideally suited for advertising certain products that depend on common knowledge. And what Chue showed, it isn't just the number of eyeballs that advertisers pay for. They actually pay more per eyeball for the Super Bowl because it generates common knowledge. So this might include products that don't work unless lots and lots of people adopt them at the same time. The Macintosh computer, which was introduced in the most expensive ad in the history of television that ran only once, Ridley Scott's 1984 ad in the 1984 Super Bowl, which said nothing about the product. But just said,
on January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
The idea was that no matter how insanely great the Macintosh was, and it was insanely great at the time, it was the first computer with windows, with icons, with menus, with a mouse, but no one was going to be the geek, the oddball who has this fantastic computer and be the only one, and therefore not be able to find apps for it, and service, user groups. So how do you get everyone to buy it at the same time? Well, everyone has to know that everyone else knows about it, and the Super Bowl was very good for that. Or the Discover card, introduced in the Super Bowl, offered a number of advantages compared to Visa and MasterCard, but why would you get a Discover card if you didn't think that a lot of merchants would accept it? And why would a merchant accept it unless they thought a lot of customers would use it? You have to generate that common awareness in a stroke, and that's what a Super Bowl ad can do. And the third thing is products that are consumed in public, that is not toothpaste or motor oil or batteries, but beer, running shoes, even movies and books, which you want to talk about with your friends afterwards. Brand loyalty or brand identification, being an Adidas wearer versus a Nike wearer. I mean, kind of running shoes are running shoes, but people buy those brands just because of the identity. You have to know that other people know about that product before you'll be willing to buy it. Or in the case of, let's say, a blockbuster movie or a best-selling novel, part of the fun is seeing the movie. Part of the fun is discussing it with friends, around the water cooler, or even going out for coffee after the movie. And so Often blockbuster movies are also advertised on the Super Bowl for that reason. It doesn't even be the Super Bowl. It can be a televised presidential debate or a widely anticipated interview. Just something, there's a premium to advertising that generates common knowledge as well as lots and lots of private knowledge.
What I love about that case study is that it's actually measurable. Like the cost per viewer is just greater.
Yeah.
And we can actually measure the value of that common knowledge, which, as you say, is powerfully important for network effect products and also for sort of cars. I want my shoes to say something about myself, and I want you to know what that is.
Exactly.
And we can only generate that if it's in the sphere of common knowledge.
Yeah, in the case of shoes, it's not clear what a Nike wearer is or a Bud Light drinker is. I mean, what goes along with that image? But probably it's that I'm discerning enough not to use no-name generics. So there's at least some cachet, and that's what the advertisers are trying to gin up.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit purina.com/purple to learn more.
As we move into weightier and weightier areas in which common knowledge impacts all of us, let's talk about cancel culture. In the last couple decades, many scholars have been punished for constitutionally protected speech in American universities. You've described this as a regime of intellectual repression more severe than the McCarthy era. What's been going on, and what does this have to do with common knowledge?
Yeah, it's not just a hyperbolic panic. This is based on actual data on number of firings, incidents of censorship, and censuring in universities from the Foundation for Individual Rights of Expression. Although it is now, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, cancel culture has been exploded on the right, where anyone who doubts how saintly Charlie Kirk was can expect to be mobbed on social media, sometimes fired, sometimes target of death threats. So it is a human instinct, and I call the chapter the canceling instinct. It's an issue for me because I'm pushing back against it in academia. I co-founded and I'm a co-president of the Council on Academic Freedom at Harvard. But the point of that chapter isn't to fight that battle here, but rather it's to take the stance of a psychologist, which is what I am, and ask, why do people feel the need to censor and deplatform and silence in the first place? And I think common knowledge enters into it. That's why it's in this book. I think it comes from the sense that our moral and social norms, what a decent person does, is a matter of common knowledge. That is, you don't tell ethnic jokes anymore. You don't, you pick up your dog poop. You don't expose certain body parts. All of these norms that govern our day-to-day behavior, not because there are police that enforce some law, but just because everyone knows you don't do that. And everyone knows that everyone knows it. So these are our norms. And so when a norm is breached in a public space, that is, you think everyone sees it being violated, there is an urge to prop up the norm by punishing that person also in a public place. It used to be that we had public hangings and public beheadings and pillories and stocks in the town square, where it's important not just that the person be punished, but that everyone see the person be punished and everyone know that everyone else could see it. That's what keeps a norm a norm. In the case of academia, largely tilted to the left, but it can also happen on the right. There's certain sacred values that people feel a need to prop up. In the case of academia, that systemic racism is an emergency that has to be constantly noticed and combated. In the case of the right, that conservatives are victims of institutionalized prejudice against conservatives by a left-wing conspiracy. And so if someone seems to defy that common understanding, you can't let them get away with it. And social media makes it very easy to pile on someone. You can get 600 signatures to a petition in a few minutes. And so I think so the combination of doing it through social media, and the reason that so many officials, deans and presidents and executives sometimes capitulated to the mob and fired someone for some innocent remark is they see hundreds of tweets denouncing that person, and they just want the negative publicity to go away. And it's just so easy to gin up on social media. So I quote a story that scientists love to tell. Turns out, I fact-checked it, turns out to be apocryphal. It never happened. But it's a good story anyway. So according to this story, in the 19th century, some proper lady, sometimes it's the wife of a vicar, learns about Darwin. And she, and she exclaims, "Descended from apes, my dear, let us hope it is not true, but if it is, let us hope it not become widely known." It's commonly known, that is, everyone knows that everyone knows it. That was thought in her day to be a threat to the moral order that humans were divinely created. In our day, there are other sacred beliefs that people hope they're not true, but if they're true, they want them not to be widely known.
Yes, exactly. So the policing of norms, the maintenance and policing of norms is critical to these dynamics. And you were on the receiving end of some of this. In July 2020, I think there were more than 600 linguists who signed an open letter to the Linguistic Society of America to remove you as an LSA fellow. Was that an unpleasant experience? What were the allegations? How was that for you?
Oh, it was. I mean, it was unpleasant, but quite trivial in the course of things. If it had succeeded, which it did not, it would have removed one line from my resume that probably no one would have even noticed whether it was there or not. So I'm not a distinguished fellow anymore. Who gives a damn? But what made it upsetting, for me, I'm a tenured professor. I'm a big shot. It doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
The two things that did concern me is, one is the message that it sends to more vulnerable scholars. That is, don't depart from orthodoxy, or your nice career you got there would be a real shame if something happened to it. And also the sheer stupidity of the petition. For example, I tweeted a study by one of my colleagues at Harvard showing that racism has been in decline. I mean, you kind of think that would be a good thing, but no, if the heart of wokeness is that systemic racism is as present as ever, then survey data showing that really is in decline are unwelcome. But the point is, even if that survey was bad, even if racism is the same, either way, it's an empirical hypothesis. It can't be evil to point out something which has some claim to the truth. It's either true or false, but it can't be bad. But this was considered a terrible sin. Or I cited the columnist David Brooks, and in one of them he suggests that men and women aren't exactly the same, which is true.
Yes.
But for citing David Brooks, who said something that is true, but perhaps unwelcome in some circles, that was considered a sin. So the sheer idiocy of the petition, combined with the implicit threat to vulnerable scholars, made it concerning.
And it was aligned with a theme of criticism that you have received in your books, The Better Angels of Our Nature and Enlightenment Now. You describe data showing that the world is by and large getting better for most people. This has been received by a subset of people on the left as some kind of indication that you're denying the suffering or not seeing the suffering or areas of decline in quality of life that some groups have experienced in recent decades. What do you make of that criticism?
Progressives hate progress.
Right.
Yes, I did get pushed back. even though it wasn't a case that everything is fine, something can be better now than it was in the past and still not be perfect. There can still be problems, but the problems might be less severe, like extreme poverty, which has been in decline, like deaths from war, like racial prejudice, like discrimination against women. There's still plenty of all of that, but there's less than there used to be. I mean, it's as if people don't understand the mathematical truism that X is less than Y is not the same thing as saying that X is 0. But that is the reaction. It's partly stoked by the availability bias. This is going back to the top of our conversation on sort of irrationality. And people's impression of the world is often driven by anecdotes or impressions that are easily retrievable from memory. They're available, but they may not be statistically representative. And that happens basically because journalism is an availability machine. It reports on everything that has gone wrong in the last few hours or the last few minutes, but it doesn't report on things that have not gone wrong. A city that has not been attacked by terrorists, part of the world that's not at war. The very nature of news skews toward the negative compared to data. That is, draw a graph with the number of war deaths per year, and you see that it's gone down. I mean, not in a straight line. There are ups and downs. We're currently in a bit of an uptick, but the overall trend is downward, and that's something that you can't appreciate except by seeing data.
It strikes me that there may be a few things in play. I mean, one is that I think the global data about progress globally is I believe it to be true that people are much more optimistic about a sense of progress in much of the developing world, where there's been great progress in infant mortality and education, nutrition, all these different areas. In the U.S. in recent decades, of course, there are people noting that life expectancy has been in decline. There was obviously COVID, but there's also been overdoses, suicides, cardiovascular disease on the rise. I also think among people in the younger generation, this sense of a declining share of U.S. households in the middle class, the probability that you'll be better off than your parents is declining for younger generations. So I think there's sort of local pessimism. This strikes me as maybe one variable. But the second one, which you really, I think, describe beautifully in the book, is people conflating a sacred belief with a logical argument, right? And the sacred belief is there is suffering and we must acknowledge suffering. And particularly on the left, the sensibility tends to be, to point out any kind of progress is to somehow disrespect the experience of suffering that's occurring.
You put your finger on it, but my response to that is, if you think that despite decades or centuries of trying to make the world a better place, things are as bad as they've ever been, the natural response should be fatalism or cynicism. Like, why even bother?
Yes.
Nothing works, nothing makes anything any better. The logical response to that is, well, just live your life, be happy, concentrate on yourselves and your children, because you can't make the world a better place. My counter argument is, far from being a cause for complacency, if anything, it's a cause for redoubling our efforts, because they have worked. They have achieved progress. We need to make more. Let's make more. Progress doesn't happen because of some law of nature, some law of the universe. Quite the contrary. The laws of the universe say that things will tend toward greater disorder, greater chaos. But it's human effort, human ingenuity, fueled by human sympathy, compassion, concern for others, that has made progress possible in the past. And that's what we have to double down on if we want to make progress in the future.
You noted in an interview with the Times of London earlier this month that you were pinned between cancel culture and Trump, right? That after spending much of the last decade fighting threats to academic free speech from cancel culture and the woke left, you now find yourself facing Trump's campaign to choke off funding and curtail the independence of universities, right? So you now would appear to be certainly a rational centrist fighting for the rights of scholars.
A normie, a radical centrist, you can say. But yeah, this is not true, not just in the large landscape of intellectual and cultural life, but in particular, being an employee of Harvard University, which has been at the eye of the storm, and facing threats from both directions. I co-founded the Council on Academic Freedom because of some incidents at Harvard, such as the driving out of my colleague Carol Hooven because she said in a TV interview that the biologists recognized two sexes, and people at Harvard made her life a living hell. Just one example. But on the other hand, the Trump administration has tried to cut off all research grants based on rather dubious accusations of anti-Semitism. Sometimes they shift the accusations. Some weeks it's anti-Semitism, some weeks it's lack of diversity in viewpoints, some weeks it's affirmative action. Just an attempt to cripple higher education. But yes, in general, but also in particular, the institution that I happen to work for has been the epicenter of these threats from both directions.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
Okay, Chad. Today you're gonna drive the all-electric Toyota BZ.
But my electric vehicle phobia. I'm not ready, Dr. Ross.
I believe in you.
Oh my gosh. We're inside it.
Try to take deep breaths, okay?
The ventilated seats, they're touching me.
You can do this, Chad. Drive the car. How do you feel, Chad?
I feel cured. Woohoo! I'm doing it!
The all-electric BZ. One drive can change your mind. Toyota. Let's go places.
Steve, you ended your TED Talk about this book this way.
I hope that having explained the logic behind human harmony, I don't have to explain how these norms are currently under threat or what is at stake if we lose them. As a man once said, what's there to say is so obvious.
I think in the interest of common knowledge, we may have to ask you to be more explicit. What is at stake?
Yes, well, the norms that I was referring to indirectly in that wrap-up, first of all, norms of civil discourse in the political arena, and I don't have to be coy, Donald Trump has exploded norms that have been in force in both liberals and conservatives for decades, such as you don't blatantly lie, you don't insult people to their face, you don't demean women because of their appearance, you don't insult war veterans, parents of soldiers who have died fighting for their country, you don't denigrate your predecessor in the office of president and the international stage, you don't boast, you don't constantly attack half of the country if you're president. All of these norms Trump has gleefully exploded. And I think since it isn't just him, but by showing that you can get away with it in a public arena, it has spread to others like Elon Musk. That is a degradation of our public discourse, which is a problem not just because we want people to be nice, we don't want them to be, angry and vengeful, but just we have problems to solve, and we're not going to solve them if people who disagree are going to be called evil and are going to be repressed. We've got to get together and solve our problems, and that's what the norms of civil discourse are designed to do. But also there are norms on the global scale that even though they aren't made out of anything, they're just expectations of what you do or don't do, they may have kept the world at peace. Norms like nation states are immortal and you don't question their existence. International borders are grandfathered in and you don't constantly have armed disputes over whether some piece of land that's on the other side of the border rightfully belongs to you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that was the cause of war for centuries. As of 1946, we more or less got over that by implementing the norms that nation states are immortal, borders are grandfathered in, war is not acceptable. Like all norms, they exist because people think they exist. There's no global police force that can enforce them. There's the United Nations, but that's toothless. And so even casually trolling about annexing Greenland or making Canada the 51st state Or in the case of the Russia-Ukraine war, saying Ukraine started it, blatantly, obviously false. The danger is that it kind of says, well, from now on, any country can fantasize about taking back territory from some other country that they think belongs to them. And that could open the door to an era of warfare.
One gets the sense, and I think we do have listeners of the show on both sides of the aisle, but I think a lot of people who even supported Trump recognize that many of these norm violations are extraordinary. I think Trump himself seems to have been surprised when he said things like, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. There's almost a sense that he just sort of stumbled through all these, some of these initial norm violations, realized that people read it as authenticity and, and candor, and now is sort of taking a wrecking ball to norms, which the implications, the degree to which our world runs on respect for norms is probably not something that most people think about to the degree that you do in this book, right? And I think that's why you landed there in your TED Talk, right? Is that the consequences, we have these incredibly kind of convoluted layers of things that we admit, things that we share, things that we maybe dissemble about. We do all of that out of deference for norms in order to collaborate more effectively as a species. The consequences of throwing all that aside are considerable.
That's exactly right. That is an excellent summation of what I wanted people to understand more deeply, namely what is a norm, which ones are important, there are times in which you do have to overturn a norm. There are sacred cows that have to be tipped over. But human social life and political life and economic life runs on norms, and it's good to have some awareness of what keeps them in place.
The last thing I would say, Steve, so as not to land in such a sort of a dire tone, is that as vexing as humans are, as strange and sometimes frustrating as humans are, there is real beauty to this dance we do with language and the many layers of truth that we collectively manufacture and sustain in our common knowledge. And so much of the nuance we love in art and literature and psychology is because of this complicated dance we all do. And I found myself, as I was finishing your book, finding this beautiful. And we do all of this in a collective attempt to collaborate better.
That's exactly right. It's common knowledge that really allows for the accomplishments that make humans human. Humans are not solitary. What makes humans humans is that we coordinate in groups from couples to nations to, in some cases, the entire world. And I think common knowledge is the underpinning, the cement, the foundation of that ability to coordinate.
All right. Well, hopefully our arc of knowledge will continue to bend towards rationality. Thank you, Steve Pinker, for being with us today. It's lovely.
Thanks so much, Rufus. It's been a pleasure.
And that's our show. Steven Pinker's new book, When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, is available wherever books are sold.
And as everyone should know, in addition to this podcast, we also have an incredible book club called the Next Big Idea Club. And we've recently made a bunch of very exciting changes to how this club operates. Rufus, you want to tell folks a little bit about what's new?
Yes, let's try to make this common knowledge, Caleb. We have been working quietly for months on completely reimagining the Next Big Idea Club book subscription product. And really what we've done is we've reinvented it as something that's very closely aligned with this podcast, because we have so much fun looking at all the colossal, important new books coming out, choosing the very best of them to be guests on our show. And what we want to do is deliver to our listeners, to those who subscribe to the club, the 6 most important books of the year, the podcast conversations that we most deeply anticipate directly to your doorstep. So you're going to get those 6 books the day they're published or thereabouts, And then we invite all of our members into direct live Q&A conversations, either live in New York at events, which we often throw, or online with these important world-changing thinkers. And so I really see it as a way to more deeply connect what we do on this podcast with what we're doing online with our membership community.
And so if folks join right now, they get access to our first selection, which is Brene Brown's new book, Strong Ground. Fantastic book by the one and only Brene Brown. And, not just the book, but they'll get access to our WhatsApp community, all sorts of digital goodies. We have a daily newsletter that they'll become subscribers to. So it's really a tremendous opportunity to engage with a community of thinkers and like-minded, curious individuals. And you can do that by going to nextbigideaclub.com and learning more.
Should we give him the promo code, Caleb? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we can share it. So the promo code is podcast, all caps, podcast. There's a link in the episode notes to remind you about it, and I think it gets you 20% off. So that's a pretty solid deal.
We'd love to have you all join.
All right. Well, today's show was produced by me, Caleb Bissinger, sound designed by our good friend Mike Toda.
I'm Rufus Griscom. See you next week.